Hi everyone, my name is Leanne and today I'm going to be reviewing all of the books that I read in July. So I read 10 books in July and I'm actually over halfway through another few books as well. This is pretty uncommon for my reading. I do have that kind of mindset where I feel like because I talk about books here, I talk about books on the internet, I feel like I need to have everything tied up really neatly at the end of the month. So I have this slightly annoying habit where if I am partway through a book and it's leading towards the end of the month, I feel the need to really power through it. So I have almost like a clean break at the end of the month. And I didn't do that in July, so I'm partway through quite a lot of books. So in terms of quantity, I was reading quite a lot in July. I read 5 books for grown-ups, 4 of those were novels and 1 of them was a poetry collection, and then I have 5 books that were for younger readers. 4 of those were middle grade and 1 of them was young adult. So I'm going to start with the adult fiction and a new favourite book of the year so far. So I read Homestretch by Graham Norton. Graham Norton, of course, is mainly known for his TV show and being a presenter, being a comedic actor, but he's also a very accomplished novelist, and I had read 2 of his novels before and really enjoyed both of them. But for me, Homestretch was just in a complete different league in terms of my enjoyment and appreciation and admiration for his talent as a novelist. So in 1987, in a small town in Ireland, there is a tragic accident that rocks this town to its core. It is a car accident and Connor is one of the survivors. He cannot bear to stay amongst the people in the town who are angry, who are grieving. So he goes off to England to start to build a new life for himself. We jump forward in time at various points in the novel to see how Connor's life has evolved, but also how the lives of those connected to him and in the town and his family, how their lives have evolved too. There are so many secrets being kept by not only Connor, but the people associated with him, the people he has tried to move away from, the life he has tried to move away from. There are so many secrets. And there were many points in the novel where you feel like you've got the full picture, but you don't quite yet. There are a few other pieces of the jigsaw that are yet to be revealed. And piecing together that mystery of what actually happened the night of that car accident was really propelling in terms of the plot. But what I really adored about this book was its exploration of what it was like to be a gay man in Ireland in the 1980s and indeed beyond. The prejudice that gay men faced, the confusion they experienced, the violence that was targeted towards them. And it really puts emphasis on the queer people that were displaced from Ireland that felt the need to move to somewhere else to live authentically and more safely. I thought that depiction was so powerful and so nuanced in how it showed different characters experiencing their inner conflict or confusion in different ways. I think if you have read Caroline O'Donoghue's The Rachel Instant and you were really interested in the nuance in how older male gay characters were depicted in that novel, you will find that explored much more in this one. I did also want to read out the last paragraph from Graham Norton's acknowledgements because I found it really powerful and I think it really sums up a lot of this book. Finally, I would like to thank all the people who stayed in Ireland to fight for the modern, tolerant country it has become. I took the easy way out and left to find places where I could be myself. The dedicated, passionate, tireless campaigners who remained mean that I am proud and privileged to return. Your extraordinary achievements make writing a novel seem like a very small task indeed. I would highly recommend this one. I think it's the best thing I've read from Graham Norton so far. I also read a romance book in July, so I read Tastes Like Shakar by Nisha Sharma. This is the same author that wrote Dating Dr. Dale, which I think I read last year. These books are sweet and spicy retellings of Shakespeare plays, and in this one it is Much Ado About Nothing. You don't need to be particularly familiar with the plays to enjoy the novel. They really stand on their own. So this is the romance between Bobby and Benjamin, or as he's nicknamed, Bunty. They are the best friends of a bride and groom, who you may remember if you have read Dating Dr. Dale. Both Bobby and Bunty are involved in planning this wedding. Bobby is a wedding planner by trade and Bunty is a chef. At the beginning of their relationship, there is quite a lot of conflict, but they decide to try and put it to one side in order to plan the most amazing wedding for their best friends. However, things don't run smoothly when they begin to realize that someone is trying to sabotage the wedding. Bobby and Bunty have to work together to plan the wedding, but also try and figure out who is the saboteur. And of course, as they spend more and more time together, it starts kindling those flames between the two of them. There were so many things I loved about this book. I really liked the dynamic between the two main leads. Also, I think any kind of romance book that is linked with food, I really enjoy for some reason. I really enjoy food writing in fiction. There's something about it that I find really evocative. And I think planning a wedding is just such a fun tool for playing around with mischief and conflict and things not going to plan. And there's a lot of high expectations around a wedding, and that's what much of this novel is about. It is about the expectation that our two main leads put on not only themselves, but the expectations that are put on them by those surrounding them, in particular their families, and the very high standards that they are being held to by themselves and externally. This was a really fun read. I'm actually not sure if there is a third Shakespeare retelling in this series, but if there is, I would definitely like to read it. I also read Strange Heart Beating by Eli Goldstone. I'm not sure if it's Eli or Ellie. I guess this one's probably a bit more literary than books I've been reading in the recent months. In this book, we're following Seb and the aftermath of his wife, Leda, being killed by a swan. So immediately we have quite an obvious mythological reference to Leda and the swan there. Seb is going through his late wife's belongings and finds a packet of unopened letters from a man named Olaf that he has no idea who this person is. Seb travels to her hometown in Latvia to try and piece together some of the missing elements that he has from her life and her history. And throughout his path of discovery, we see that this novel is really kind of about how obsession and possession play into love. There are devastating realizations that you make over the course of the novel alongside Seb as well. I did think this book was very readable. I read it in one sitting. It's not too long. I did find what it had to say about how people conceal parts of themselves or their history for one reason or another, and whether even if you love someone, you ever truly know their history. I found all of that really interesting. But in terms of kind of pure enjoyment of the novel, I think it's one that I won't spend much time thinking about it beyond the reading experience. The final adult fiction novel I read in July was The Cassandra Complex by Holly Smale. I think this has been renamed for the paperback edition of it. But Holly Smale I knew from the Geek Girl series. I was a huge fan of Geek Girl, probably, oh gosh, I don't know, like coming up to 10 years ago, and a lot of resurgence has been put on that series because of the Netflix show. But this is an adult fiction novel from Holly. And this is a novel that uses themes of time travel to prompt kind of, I guess, philosophical approach to life kind of questions. So Cassandra is someone that really wants her life to be just so, very particular about the way she wants it to go, the routines that she has, what she wants to do. So her life is thrown into turmoil when all at once she is asked to leave her house, she loses her job, and she gets dumped by her boyfriend. So that has so much chaos, so much turmoil, upheaval for her, and it is then that she discovers that she can time travel. So she is able to go back to a particular moment that she would like to and redo the situation. I read another novel recently that involved not exactly time travel in that way, but it was a novel that offered the main character the opportunity to see their life if they had done something differently. And one of the criticisms I had of that novel was it felt like the message was very obvious from the outset. I knew what I was getting from the book, or what I was meant to get from the book, before I'd even really read it. And I think this book very easily could have been the same, but it wasn't. And I think the reason why I found this one more compelling is because Cassandra is neurodivergent. Throughout the novel, other characters make reference to her being on the spectrum, and it's not something that she connects with throughout the novel, but as the novel reaches the end, and I don't feel like this is really a spoiler, but we find out that Cassandra's mother was diagnosed as autistic and suspected that Cassandra was also autistic. What I thought was interesting about how Cassandra approaches time travel is that in many ways, whether she's doing it intentionally or not, it gives her the opportunity to see how conversations play out in different ways depending on what she says. So she has the opportunity to kind of redo situations. So conversations and situations with her housemates, with the man that she is dating, with her work. And for me, as someone that is not autistic, this gave me a real insight to how much kind of mental gymnastics that neurodivergent people can do, or have to do, are forced to do, because the rest of the world is not thinking the way they are. What I also really loved about this book is because Cassandra is doing a lot of time travel with the man that she is dating to redo elements of their conversation, of their dynamic, she does end up acknowledging, like, oh God, am I manipulating him, taking advantage? Which is a huge criticism I have of the movie About Time, because at no point is the like power imbalance of that situation of time traveling back to redo situations with someone that you are dating, how much of an power imbalance that is. I loved that this book acknowledged that, and complicated sibling relationships and how relationships can be healed. So I really liked this book. I felt like it explored time travel in a way that I hadn't seen it done before in contemporary fiction. The poetry collection I read in July was Kamukanda by Keo Chingonye. And this collection is an exploration of Black boyhood and manhood, but also the transitions and rites of passage between those two states. So Kamukanda is a word that translates to initiation, and it is the name given to the rites of passage that boys from the Luval tribe go through when becoming a man. And in this collection, that is essentially kind of what the poet is exploring, is those kind of transition stages, those passages between two states of being and two worlds. So we have kind of ancestral history and the contemporary, the living and the dead, but also how the poet perceives himself and who he is in contrast to how he is perceived externally. And this collection is really an exploration of, in particular, British male masculinity, boyhood and manhood. In its simplest terms, it's about a young Black British man growing up. It's also heavily influenced, I think, from kind of music and sound effect, but I also think speaks to other writers in quite a conversational way. I think what I'm trying to say is that, like, I feel like it's in conversation with other art and culture that has come before it. And yeah, I thought this was a really great collection. I would recommend it if you are someone that reads poetry. So the young adult book I read in July was a very short one. It was The Doomsday Date by Afrida Abiki Ayomede. This was the Young Adult World Book Day book for earlier this year, so it is very short. So when I'd spoken about this book before, I hadn't really thought about when it was set. All I really knew was that it was set before what people thought was going to be the end of the world. We're following two characters. One of them has this kind of bucket list of things that he wants to do before the end of days, before doomsday. 10 things that he wants to do before this happens. And he will need his best friend to help him finish the list. In particular, the thing on the list that scares him the most. Now, what I did not realize was this was set in like 1999 going into 2000, which of course makes so much sense. Like the minute I started to read it, I was like, oh, this makes complete sense that it is set at the turn of the millennium. People thought it was doomsday, but I just hadn't connected that all together. And it's quite interesting to think about this book as actually in many ways kind of a piece of historical fiction, because that was actually over 2 decades ago. So I did enjoy that. I found that quite nostalgic. Obviously, it's a very quick read. It is a slim World Book Day book, so is often a point of entry for readers. So it's very accessible. It's a simple, very sweet story, and I enjoyed it. I also read Poison for Breakfast by Lemony Snicket. Now, the name Lemony Snicket is most well known, of course, for A Series of Unfortunate Events. The author's real name is Daniel Handler, and Lemony Snicket is kind of a persona that he adopts for the A Series of Unfortunate Events novels, and Lemony Snicket is kind of a character himself within the novels, and that is really taken to the extreme in Poison for Breakfast. It is the author, Lemony Snicket, telling us what happens after he has his breakfast and he is told that he has had poison for breakfast, and we just follow him throughout the day trying to figure out where the poison came from, what's going on, unraveling the riddle of his own potential demise, which in many ways is a very kind of confusing meta way for this novel to be written. And the author plays with how meta that is. Like, the novel kind of acknowledges that it is being written, and when you are writing things, you may tell things a certain way for the narrative, or you may exclude certain bits of information. Like, the author makes you very aware that they are the author writing whatever they want to write, and they are controlling the story. So the novel kind of prompts a lot of considerations about the nature of authorship and storytelling and narrative. This was another one I read in one sitting. I read it very quickly. I did enjoy it. I do enjoy that kind of whimsical, playful way of storytelling. I'm not quite sure how a child reader would get on with this book. I do feel like this is a book for maybe grown-ups that love a series of unfortunate events and enjoy that playful kind of way Lemony Snicket and or Daniel Handler presents these stories. I'm not sure I would actually give this book to a child, but I did have a very lovely cozy reading experience with it. Another middle grade book I read was Mic Drop by Sharna Jackson. So this is a high-rise mystery. This is the second middle grade mystery series with these characters. It is set in the Try, which is kind of this like estate of flats. We're following the same main characters that we did in the first book as they try and solve the mystery that is going on. This time it is connected with a former resident turned pop star of the Try. And I really loved how the book featured people who have come from communities like the Try and have gone on to be incredibly successful in cultural or arts areas like music. And how it showed how people feel still connected or not connected with their communities that they grew up in. But more importantly than that, this was just a really pacey mystery that I think kids that love mystery novels or murder mysteries will find really compelling. I think how the mystery unfolds is done really well. And I think it really stands out against other mystery novels that are out there in the kids' market. Finally, I have two books that I read for work. The first of those is Twice Upon a Time by Michelle Harrison. This is also a mystery novel. Michelle Harrison you may know for the Pinch of Magic series, among others. And this is the latest book from her. And if you loved the sisterhood elements of Pinch of Magic, I think you would really like this one too. Twice Upon a Time is about two twin sisters who are staying in this kind of old manor house for the holidays. And while they are there, they begin to uncover a lot of mysteries. A missing woman, a baby left on the doorstep, and these sisters, who have quite different personalities in a way that is really fun, take it upon themselves to try and uncover what has gone on here. But the twist in the tale is that these sisters have the power to stop time, and they use that in order to try and solve the mystery. So again, this is another one that has a really kind of pacey middle grade mystery to it, but also has like elements of an old kind of dusty house and historical aspects as well. I really enjoyed this one. And finally, the other workbook I read was Finding Hope by Nicola Baker. I enjoyed this so much. This is the first book in the Whistledown Farm series. It is about Ava, who is from the city and is sent to stay with some family in the countryside while her parents are traveling for work. And this is all quite new to Ava. She doesn't really know anything about the countryside, about dealing with animals, and we follow her trying to embrace countryside life but making mistakes and successes along the way. I thought how the conflict between her and her cousin, who knows everything about the countryside, he has grown up in it, so he knows it really well. I think the conflict and resolution between those characters was done really fantastically, and as someone who is also a city girl, I found myself relating to Ava quite a lot as she tries to figure out how to navigate this new situation for her. It is very, very sweet. If you have a reader in your life that loves animals, they will adore this. And I loved the kind of soft messaging around how being in nature and connecting with animals is great for children's mental health. So they are all of the books from July. Do leave me a comment down below if you have any thoughts on anything I've mentioned. And if you want to let me know you're here but you don't have anything in particular to say, leave an animal emoji in honor of Finding Hope. That's it from me today. I hope you're well, and I'll speak to you next time.